Well, you're exactly right, because he knows what these players are all about. He scouted them before and bringing them either to Chicago and now in Indianapolis. So he knows these players better than anyone, and he feels comfortable with what they can do.
The Colts were just on the clock, and they selected Brian Milne, fullback from Penn State, who's a great heartwarming story to be selected in this NFL draft, Mel.
Well, they're loading up on fullbacks. And of course, Brian Milne goes into that mix with a guy like Potts, who's the restricted free agent. Of course, you look at Zach Crockett, the job he did late in the year. He's certainly in their future plan. So what they did, they had Dilger at tight end. They brought in Slutzker. They have the fullback situation straightened out. They're bringing more depth with Brian Milne, a versatile fullback. But when he had a chance in that bowl game to do the job, when Whitman was hurt, he came through big time.
Remember, Milne was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease back in high school, came back, had a successful career at Penn State, including a couple of huge touchdowns in their great comeback win 2 years ago at Illinois in Champaign. We'll update the Bears picks and more as we continue after this.
There's a hunger on the highway, crunching down the road, blowing by those burgers.
Introducing Big Border Taco at just 99 cents.
It's a mother load.
We added more beef, more cheese, tons more crunch. In fact, the Big Border Taco's so big, we had to beef up our trucks.
There's nothing ordinary about it, Taco Bell.
All great cars are built from the ground up. But to build something truly extraordinary, we had to dig a little deeper. Introducing the new Acura CL Coupe. Further proof that luxury doesn't have to be boring.
I've cut it 3 times a week, but never too low. I've watered it, I've fed it, I've talked to it. Careers will be made on it. It does not fear the occasional weed or the suicide squeeze. They will spit on it, but they will wear it home. This is my yard, and you can play on it if you're good enough.
True Value, a proud sponsor of Major League Baseball and yards everywhere.
I'm always on the road, so I use my calling card every day. But MCI Friends and Family only covered my card calls to home, so I got AT&T True Reach Savings. Now, wherever I'm calling, I'm totally covered. Now, that's being backed up.
AT&T True Reach Savings. Save 25% on all types of U.S. calls on your AT&T phone bill when you spend just $25 a month. Proofs on the bill.
Ooh, I like the sound of that.
Savings on all kinds of calls. That's your true choice, AT&T.
We're more than halfway through the 4th round of the NFL draft. It's a long round because compensatory selections are at the back end, and we'll explain that when we get down to them. Miami's on the clock, so let's bring in Chris Mortensen from Miami. Jimmy Johnson has been busy. Now time to do some selecting, Mort.
Well, Mike, he actually picked up another draft pick with that trade with Kansas City, so he started with 9 picks before he selected Kirk Pointer a little bit ago, the cornerback from Austin Peay. And, you know, they picked Dorian Brew last night, another cornerback from Kansas, and both these guys are similar. They both run real well, and they're both played a lot in man coverage. And somebody pointed out that, hey, they don't look like they're real good tacklers. Well, Jimmy doesn't care. He says in their scheme, his guys don't have to tackle. All they got to do is cover the wide receiver. And, of course, in the AFC East, there's been a lot of wide receivers picked. So Jimmy looking a lot for defense. In fact, it's been a very active war room today. In fact, also a little bit more crowded war room. Yesterday, coaches weren't allowed into it with few exceptions. Today, you see a full room, all the coaches in there, because the coaches are very actively involved in evaluating talent. And Jimmy is using all their resources and certainly letting them get involved in this day where they do, as we mentioned, have 8 more picks left in this draft. And Jimmy expects to get a lot of speed, a lot of defense, and wants to have a very competitive training camp, so he's building from there. All right, let's go back to Mike in New York.
Could sell PSLs for that war room. That's a huge war room that Miami has down there with everybody in there. Their selection, guy we know, Stanley Pritchett, fullback out of South Carolina.
Well, he's a halfback turned fullback, and of course, in Brad Scott's offense, of course, he coached William Floyd. He saw some comparisons. This kid is an outstanding pass receiver coming out of the backfield, uses that big 240-pound frame and pretty good quickness to be a real factor. You just don't use the Stanley Pritchett on easy swing passes. You can get him down the field. He's very effective. Of course, running the football, I think he's a little underrated. Remember, he was a former halfback, so he has a little more moves, a little bit more change of direction than the normal pure fullback would have. The question with Pritchett in the NFL is going to be lead blocking. Since he was not a pure fullback until this year, can he be the guy who can lead a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar into the hole? That's what the question is going to be at Miami.
I don't think he's going to be that guy. I think he's going to come in on third down and hopefully, you know, be the guy swinging out of the back. But he's got excellent hands, like Mel talked about. And he's a really good guy to have in the locker room because he's going to give you all he's got, but you're not going to know he's there. And the one thing, you know, he's graduated. His mother and father are both educators. And he went to school, got his degree, so he has something to fall back on. Very likable young man.
And a pass catcher, so warning out there to Keith Byers and all the other Dolphin running backs who are involved in the passing game. You will be pushed by the young guys this year in Stanley Pritchett and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You're starting to see Jimmy Johnson rebuild a team. He had great success in Dallas. Is this the same NFL that Jimmy Johnson left 3 years ago? Here's what some NFL people think.
Player personnel directors or a coach's dream to come up with that many draft choices and be able to really stock your team for the future. But that won't happen now.
Well, of course, he won't have the tremendous amount of draft choices that he got early in Dallas with the Herschel Walker trade.
Well, yeah, I think, you know, some people in a simplistic way look at the success of the Cowboys and they say, well, it was the Herschel Walker trade. Well, Herschel Walker probably brought us, you know, 5 or 6 players, a couple of premier players, 2 or 3 that are good players. We had over 60 trades in a 5-year period. And so there were a lot of trades, there were a lot of moves to help that franchise be where they are today.
And you see the residue of the Herschel Walker trade, and this is what everyone talks about when you say, hey, do you make a big trade like this? The answer is probably no, because you see what ended up with Dallas. Pretty impressive.
Well, it was, Mike, and I think with Jimmy Johnson, I think what you have to remember is having all these extra picks in rounds was critical when he got Eric Williams. When he took Eric Williams at the end of the 3rd round, right before that he took James Richards, a guard from California, and also at the top of the 3rd round, Godfrey Miles, a linebacker from Florida. Now, Godfrey Miles has been injured a lot, decent player when he's healthy. James Richards fell off the map, never made it. Eric Williams was his 3rd option in that round, round 3. So if he would have had 1/3, would it have been Richards or Williams? Having 3/3 was the safety net that he needed, and that's why all these extra picks are so valuable. It's really your insurance policy against a mistake.
That live look in the Dolphin war room as a player on a team that's coached by a guy who you know is the dictator there, who's going to make all the moves and likes to make moves. Do you feel that pressure as a veteran for this case Miami Dolphins?
I think what Jimmy Johnson did is went out and got guys that were self-motivated. He didn't have to stay on them. He wasn't worried about whether they were going to show up on Sunday. He got guys like a Michael Irvin and an Emmitt Smith that you just allowed them to do their jobs, and they're going to do it to the best of their ability. I don't think it was so much he scared people because he was making so many moves. I think he got the players that wanted to do the job.
Let's bring in the veteran of more than one war room in Mike Lombardi, and another war room veteran for that matter in Chris Fowler. Chris?
All right, Mike, thank you very much. This isn't going to be more of a stroke Jimmy Johnson festival here, but talk about the ways teams are built. Yeah, it's the draft, but free agency may be just as or more important these days.
Well, I think what the fans really don't understand sometimes is that there's other ways to acquire players not through the draft. And I think Jimmy uses every angle to get a player on his football team, as a lot of other teams do. I mean, the Kansas City Chiefs have done a good job in acquiring players. They're starting front in the defensive line. Vaughn Booker comes from Canada. They signed Joe Phillips is a free agent. They signed Dan Salamo in Plan B. So they've acquired some players through some other means without using the draft. And I think Jimmy brings a perfect point here in terms of acquiring players from all different angles, which you got to do in the National Football League today.
But do you agree it's going to be a lot tougher for him to do that in that worm where he's sitting right now than it was in Dallas?
I think Jimmy is very smart. I think he understands the National Football League. He can evaluate talent. He'll use any means he can to acquire players. I think obviously the competition is fierce out there. It's a very difficult league to win in, but I think Jimmy has always risen to the challenge.
And he's risen to the challenge of once again getting a lot of FaceTime on our draft coverage. Let's go back to Mike in New York.
And he'll get more FaceTime in about 5 selections. Miami's on the clock again at pick 125. We're sitting on pick 121 right now. Here are the last 6 selections in the NFL draft. Stanley Pritchett out of South Carolina, as we mentioned, to Miami, makes it 11 of the 12 SEC schools that have sent a player to the NFL draft. Ole Miss has not been heard from. And the most recent pick, another defensive end in Buffalo, Sean Moran.
Polaroid presents the NFL Draft Snapshot.
Thurman Thomas a short while ago, a sleeper pick. Well, now there's Thurman. He's realizing that sooner or later, someone has to take a back of his quality. He just